Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The Sensex and the Nifty post the biggest weekly fall in 2 years as 19 lakh crore rupees in market capitalization is wiped out. The Nifty drops below 24,000. Only 2 Nifty stocks have gained this week. Minutes of the last monetary policy meeting under Governor Shaktikanta Das show that RBI members remain steadfast on curbing inflation before easing interest rates, but external member of the MPC, Nagesh Kumar, argues for a rate cut, saying seasonal variations in inflation cannot be addressed by monetary policy. The Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman holds a pre-budget meeting with state cabinet ministers and union territories in Jaisalmer. The GST Council will meet tomorrow to decide on a new 35% tax slab on tobacco and aerated drinks and easing the tax burden on insurance. A tax rate hike on premium ready-made garments, shoes and watches is also likely to be on the agenda. Parliament adjourned sine die on the last day of winter session. The Congress accuses the BJP of desperation after an FIR is filed against Rahul Gandhi following a scuffle between MPs yesterday. Lok Sabha's productivity was over 50%. Rajya Sabha was less than 40%. India and the US government officials meet in Delhi weeks after the Biden administration imposed sanctions on 19 Indian entities for providing dual-use technologies to Russia. Indian officials reiterate that the companies did not violate any law. US officials clarify that exporting any items on the sanctions list to Russia, even for civilian use, will be considered a violation. The US government hurtles towards a shutdown. Dozens of Republicans vote against a bill backed by Donald Trump to release funds for 3 months and avert the shutdown. Without the legislation, a partial shutdown is set to begin tonight. Incoming President Donald Trump trains the tariff gun on the EU, warns the bloc that it must reduce its trade gap with the US through oil and gas purchases or face tariffs. The EU is yet to firm up a strategy on avoiding a trade war with the US despite making overtures to buy more LNG. Russia launches a barrage of missiles and drones at Kyiv, killing 1 person and damaging key infrastructure. This comes a day after defiant Vladimir Putin told reporters at a news conference he should have invaded Ukraine much earlier. More layoffs at Google as the company faces rising competition in artificial intelligence. CEO Sundar Pichai says 10% of managerial roles, including directors and vice presidents, will be made redundant. The Supreme Court upholds the High Court verdict scrapping toll collection at the Delhi-Noida flyway, rules that Noida Toll Bridge Authority, backed by IL&FS, has no case to levy toll as it has already recovered the project cost and made substantial profits. Well, let's start with the market action. Broad-based sell-off on Dalal Street this Friday, which capped a tumultuous week. The Sensex and the Nifty declined 4% this week, and this is the biggest weekly decline that we've seen in 2 years. Only 2 Nifty stocks ended the week in the green. That's the market snapshot for you. The market's closing in the red, almost a 1,000-point cut there as far as the Sensex is concerned. 800 points lower on the Nifty Bank. The IT index losing 1,000 points as well, and a 300-point cut there on the Nifty. Market cap worth 19 lakh crore rupees got wiped out in the last 5 days. Foreign portfolio investors have turned net sellers for the first time in 4 weeks with an outgo worth $884 million. Prashant is standing by to wrap up the market action. What's worrying the markets, Prashant?
Turned out to be a pretty tough day, and it looked like there would be some recovery at about 2:30 or so, but it just went the other way. I mean, morning dive, another dive, and, we ended pretty much near the low point of the day. Actually, it makes sense to take a slightly longish view, and let's do the week, really. So about almost 5% cut on the Nifty for the week, Friday to Friday. Nifty Bank, more than 5%. The mid-cap index losing about 3.5%, and the small-cap index also losing about 3.5%. So broader markets and some of the mid and small-cap indices did better as opposed to what the Nifty and the Bank Nifty did. Now, just a few other things here, just to kind of tell you the severity of what we saw this week. So it's the biggest fall for the Nifty in about 2 years. 48 out of 50 Nifty stocks this week gave negative returns. 30 of the 50 stocks fell over 5%. And except pharma, all sectoral indices were down and out. There were 3 sectors which lost over 6%. Friday to Friday. That's PSU Banks, PSU Index, and the Metals Index as well. I'll get to stocks here. And again, I'll not talk about today, but the weekly kind of change. So what was down first, because broadly it was a down and out week. Angel, 15% loss. Deepak Fertilizer was down 14. Adani Green, about 14% down. LTI Mindtree gave up about 13.5. Siemens was down 13. Piramal Enterprises, Godfrey Phillips was down about 12.5% as well. Winners in the form of 5-Star, which was up 18% this week. GIC, but of course, bulk of the gains came on Friday. K Fintech was a big consistent winner through the course of the week. Techno Electric, Newgen, and there was Action Construction Equipment about 11% for the week as well. It was a drift lower because there was, of course, there was the Fed news flow, and that I think really was the big one, which of course we reacted to on Thursday morning. But even before that, I mean, coming into the Fed, the Nifty had given up about 700 points from the highs, and the trend just picked up on the downside post that. So the Fed basically said 2 cuts. Market consensus was about 3. That's for 2025. Up ahead, of course, is the last 2 weeks of 2024. Volumes typically drop. But I think what will be interesting to watch is typically and usually global funds, EM funds, etc. Basically, foreign investors decide allocations in the first 15, 20 days of a new year. So in that sense, as we come back and interest comes back in the new year, maybe things will look a little better. And of course, the big event in January is on the 20th when there's the Trump inauguration, the Trump and the cabinet inauguration, which will be very closely watched. So heading into the last 2 weeks of 2024, and of course, this week has not been a good one. Back to you.
Well, a tough week, certainly. Prashant, many thanks. In the money market, the rupee gained some lost ground against the dollar, but the Indian currency remains above the 85 mark, which it breached for the first time yesterday. The dollar index has rallied to a 2-year high after the US Fed's hawkish commentary, and this is putting pressure on all Asian and emerging market currencies. Now, after a sharp rally in the last few weeks, Bitcoin is seeing a sell-off. Prices of the most popular cryptocurrency dropped to $93,000. And this comes just a week after the Bitcoin hit a record high of $108,000. However, the price of Bitcoin is more than doubled this year, despite the recent correction. Now, the minutes of the December RBI monetary policy meeting, the last under the former Governor Shaktikanta Das, has been released, and it shows that the RBI members on the committee, including Governor Das, remain steadfast on taming inflation before easing interest rates. The governor argued that the biggest support for growth comes from price stability, and any other approach would be counterproductive. But 2 members of the 6-member panel dissented with the majority view and argued for a rate cut. We spoke to one of them, Nagesh Kumar, an external member, to understand his rationale seeking a cut.
If we see persistence of the slowdown, obviously we will take a call on, bringing down the rates to revive the growth. And also we will have to see whether inflation and inflationary expectations persist or are anchored. So this will really be something is hard to comment now. But one thing is very clear that, the rest of the world, if we look around, except for a few central banks, they have started the cycle of normalization of monetary policy.
Well, that's the external member at the MPC, Nagesh Kumar, on why he believes a rate cut is warranted. Now, China has decided to keep its benchmark lending rates unchanged. The People's Bank of China said it would keep the 1-year loan prime rate, which affects most household loans, at 3.1%. The decision comes as China continues to see concerns of boosting economic growth and a weakening yuan. The move comes just a day after the US Federal Reserve announced a widely expected 25 basis point rate cut. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman held a pre-budget consultation meeting with ministers from states and union territories. The union government is likely to table the budget on the 1st of February. The pre-budget meeting comes a day ahead of the GST Council meeting, where members will deliberate on a whole host of proposals. These include a special rate of 35% on tobacco, aerated beverages, and a 28% GST levy on premium ready-made garments, among others. Sapna Das joins us now from Jaisalmer with more on the agenda for tomorrow's GST Council meeting.
So definitely over here in Jaisalmer, 2-day important meetings being chaired by the Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Of course, today is the pre-budget consultation with state governments. What are their expectations from the full union budget coming up on Feb 1? And of course, followed by the all-important 55th GST Council meeting, which is to be held tomorrow. Coming back on the pre-budget consultation, well, a couple of things that we need to be mindful about is that in case there are further demands for fiscal assistance by the state governments, Before the July budget, such demands had come in to an extent. Second, of course, the capex estimates, the capex numbers, and what kind of expenditure the states have been doing. Well, overall capex numbers have been slightly tardy, in the sense the pace has been slightly tardy this year, and for known reasons. So is there going to be any change on that front? What is it that states are looking forward from the union government in this budget and otherwise as well? Last but not the least, if there is going to be any change in the borrowing limit, 3.5% is what it is for the states. What are the particular demands on that? All of this will have to be seen. So that's the focus of attention for today. Of course, tomorrow is going to be the big day. GOM's recommendations on rate rationalization, the GOM's recommendations on the insurance sector, all of that is going to be in focus tomorrow. But as of now, the pre-budget consultation with state governments, that's what is going to follow in a few hours from now.
Well, that's Sapna Das reporting there from Jaisalmer. And do remember to tune into CNBC-TV18. We will be tracking the GST Council meeting closely right here through Saturday. The US government is hurtling towards a shutdown after a bill backed by Donald Trump failed to garner support from his own Republican Party colleagues. Dozens of Republicans voted against the bill, which would have funded the government for the next 3 months. Without the legislation, a partial shutdown of government will begin later tonight. And speaking of Donald Trump, he has said that the EU will face tariffs if its member countries do not purchase more American oil and gas. Trump said in a post on Truth Social that the EU must make up their tremendous deficit with the US. In 2023, US was the biggest recipient of EU goods. Last month, the EU already indicated that it will be purchasing more US energy in the coming years. Trump had also threatened to impose tariffs on products coming in from Mexico and Canada and to raise tariffs on Chinese goods. And speaking of tariffs, India's Directorate General of Trade Remedies has initiated the process to potentially hike the import duty on steel products. India's steel industry is demanding a tax hike of up to 25% on imports of certain steel products. They accuse Chinese steel makers of dumping products into India, hurting the competitiveness of Indian steel makers. The import duty on steel currently stands at 10%. Now, weeks after the US Department of Treasury imposed sanctions on 19 Indian entities and 2 individuals for exporting dual-use technology to Russia, US and Indian officials have met in New Delhi to discuss the impact of the decision. Now, we learned from sources that the Indian government has reiterated that the Indian exporters are not in violation of any law. Parikshit is standing by with more on what transpired in that meeting and what we can now expect. Parikshit.
Well, this could be a problem for the Indian defense industry, which is growing. It has an aspiration to be a big exporter in the world. 19 Indian companies and 2 individuals were sanctioned very recently by the US Treasury Department, and this essentially for violating US sanctions against Russia. Now, US, European Union, Japan and the UK have come to an agreement that there will be a list of 50 common high-priority items which cannot be exported to Russia, because these are dual-use technology items and they can be used for defense purposes against Ukraine. Now, sources say that there was a high-profile meeting held in New Delhi where members of the US Sanctions Bureau, that is the Bureau of Industrial Security, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, they were here. They met members of the Indian industry. They met the Ministry of External Affairs and also companies which had been sanctioned. And they explained them the seriousness of these sanctions and how they actually work. And they said that they expect the Indian industry to follow these sanctions and respect them as well. So what happens to these 19 countries? Experts tell us that all these 19 companies and individuals, they cannot make any exports to the United States, UK, EU, Japan, essentially any country which is an ally of the United States and accepts these sanctions. Any interface globally, even if they're not using the dollar system, any interface with the US financial system could lead to a seizure or forfeiture of their bank accounts and foreign assets. So this really makes things troublesome for all these companies. Yes, there is a way out in terms of appeal, but it is a complicated process. 2 other important points we learned from our industry sources. The US had essentially been in conversation with the Indian government for at least the last 12 to 18 months and had been giving warnings about how some of these sanctions are being violated, and dual-use items such as semiconductors, integrated circuits, machine tools, they were all going to Russia and being used for defense purposes. We're also told that there could be more Indian companies under the scanner. India reiterating that no international obligation such as the MTCR agreement, the Wassenaar agreement has been violated. These are unilateral sanctions of the United States, and the Indian companies have not violated any law of the land. But clearly, when it comes to doing business and exporting further, we will have to be very mindful of these sanctions.
All right, many thanks, Parikshit, for joining us. In other international headlines, Russia launched a barrage of missiles and drones at the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv today. At least one person has been killed and several injured in the attack. According to Kyiv's military officials, Russia launched 8 missiles on the capital, which damaged buildings across the city and sparked fires in some areas. This comes a day after defiant Russian President Putin told reporters at a news conference that he should have invaded Ukraine much earlier. The Russian central bank has defied market expectations and decided to keep interest rates unchanged at a record 21% despite soaring inflation. From Ukraine to West Asia, at least 15 Palestinians were killed in the so-called safe zones after Israel bombed 2 schools in Gaza where displaced people were sheltering. The death toll across Gaza has already crossed 45,000. A new report by the NGO Doctors Without Borders titled The Gaza Death Trap says there are clear signs of ethnic cleansing by Israeli forces in Palestinian territory. A quick check on the commodity markets. Gold prices are headed for a weekly decline of about 2%. This after the US Federal Reserve signaled a slowdown in rate cuts. Meanwhile, crude oil prices are also headed for a 2% weekly drop as concerns over demand persist. Back home, sources say the Petroleum Ministry is seeking over 25,000 crore rupees as compensation for LPG under recoveries. Now, Bajaj Auto has unveiled the latest iteration of its Chetak electric scooter, the 35 series. The series has 2 variants with a starting price of over 1.2 lakh rupees ex-showroom. A third variant will also be introduced soon. The new scooter claims to have a range of 153 kilometers per charge and a 35-litre boot space. The International Gemological Institute has made a strong debut on bourses. The shares listing at a 22% premium over the IPO price of 417 rupees. The stock pared some of its gains, but still ended above the IPO price. IGI's public offer was subscribed nearly 34 times. And the big national story, both houses of parliament adjourned sine die on the last day of a stormy winter session. The Congress accusing the BJP of desperation after its MPs filed an FIR against Rahul Gandhi following a scuffle between MPs yesterday. The BJP had claimed that 2 of its MPs were injured after allegedly being pushed by Rahul Gandhi. Congress MPs also lodged a police complaint over alleged misbehaviour towards party president Mallikarjun Kharge inside the parliament complex.
इंसिडेंट जो हुए हैं, जो घटना घटी है संसद परिसर में, ये बहुत ही निंदनीय है। हाथापाई का नौबत आना ये अच्छी बात नहीं है। कुछ सांसदों को चोट भी लगा है। पार्लियामेंट में सब लोग जनता का प्रतिनिधि के रूप में चुन के आते हैं, अपना बात रखना चाहिए। या हाथ पांव चलाना ये ठीक नहीं है।
इतने डेस्परेट हो गए हैं कि आज ऐसे एकदम झूठी बातें, झूठा एफआईआर। राहुल जी कभी किसी को पुश नहीं करेंगे। मैं उनकी बहन हूँ, इतने सालों से मैं जानती हूँ, कभी इस तरह की हरकत कभी कर ही नहीं सकते। और फ्रैंकली देश भी जानता है, देश देख रहा है कितने डेस्परेट हो गए हैं ये लोग कि इस तरह की फालतू के एफआईआर लगा रहे हैं, क्योंकि सिंपली अडानी पे चर्चा नहीं चाहते। और जो इन्होंने किया है अम्बेडकर जी के साथ, जिस तरह से अपमान किया है, ये जानते हैं कि ये देश नहीं सहेगा ये अपमान।
One of the stormiest sessions in the parliament's history has come to an end amidst a divided house. The Lok Sabha had functioned for around 62 hours, while the Rajya Sabha had functioned for less than 44 hours. The opposition and the government had traded barbs against each other. The opposition had claimed that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was insulted by the Home Minister and called for his resignation. However, the charge was patently denied by the Home Minister and the BJP, who had accused the Congress party of defaming and insulting Dr. B.R. Ambedkar during his lifetime. 2 BJP MPs had gotten injured who had claimed that they were pushed by the leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi. An FIR was also registered against him. However, the Congress party and Rahul Gandhi had denied this charge patently. Speaking of the legislative business which took place, the government was slated to introduce 15 bills for amendments to existing laws in the 21-day long parliament session. However, 4 new bills were introduced. The Bharatiya Vayuyan Vidhayak was passed in both the houses. The oil fields amendment and boilers bill was passed in the Rajya Sabha, and amendments to the bills for banking laws, railways and disaster management were passed in the Lok Sabha. Also, the bills proposing simultaneous polls for Lok Sabha and state assemblies were referred to a joint parliamentary committee comprising of 21 MPs for further consideration. It remains to be seen what kind of legislative business is slated to happen in the next session of Parliament and what kind of parliamentary committee reports till then would be submitted. Which includes the proposal for one nation, one election, which has been opposed by the opposition and is being backed by the NDA ruling alliance.
Thanks, Abhimanyu. Up next, the Supreme Court upholds the High Court verdict scrapping toll collection at the Delhi-Noida flyway. Rules that the Noida Toll Bridge Authority, backed by LNFS, has no case to levy toll. More when we return. Catch all of CNBC-TV18's news and updates on Facebook, X, Threads, Instagram and JioCinema. You're watching India Business Hour. Tech giant Google is all set to announce another round of layoffs amidst heightened competition in artificial intelligence. The CEO of Google's parent company, Alphabet, Sundar Pichai, has announced that 10% of managerial roles, including directors and vice presidents, will be made redundant. The changes are part of Google's initiative launched in September 2022 to cut costs and make the company more efficient. Amazon workers at 7 facilities across the U.S. held a protest. Hundreds of workers walked off the job early during the holiday shopping rush, accusing the retail giant of unfair treatment of its employees. Amazon says the strike is limited to a few facilities and it will not impact its overall operations. Back home, the Apex Court has set aside a 2007 National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission order that capped the interest rates banks could charge on late credit card bill payments at 30% per annum. With this decision, the Supreme Court has allowed banks the flexibility to charge penal interest rates on the default of credit card bills. HSBC, Citibank, Standard Chartered, Bank of America and American Express are the key petitioners before the Supreme Court, so a 16-year-old case being finally put to rest. The Supreme Court has ruled that the flyway connecting Noida and Delhi will continue to remain toll-free. The Apex Court upheld the Allahabad Court's 2016 order, which had stripped the Noida Toll Bridge Company's power to collect toll. Post the Supreme Court's ruling, shares of ILNFS-backed company hit a lower circuit in trade today. Ashmit is standing by now with more on the verdict. So finally, closure on this issue, Ashmit?
Well, a big setback coming in for the Noida Toll Bridge Company, so much so that the shares hit lower circuit and they stayed there the whole day post the Supreme Court judgment. The big takeaway from the judgment essentially is that no toll needs to be paid by any vehicle plying on the DND flyway. Just for some context, the DND flyway is a critical stretch of road, 9.5 kilometers, 8-lane wide, that connects Delhi, the national capital, to Noida. Lakhs and lakhs of vehicles ply on that road every day and hence critical as far as movement of people, traffic, vehicle commerce is concerned. Now, it is on the back of that the question that fell before the Apex Court is, can tolls be charged by this company which operates and maintains this road? Well, the Supreme Court had a very clear rationale in denying that. The Supreme Court essentially said that enough funds have been recovered by this company to cover the project cost, the maintenance cost, as well as substantial profits. Not just that, the Supreme Court was very critical of how Noida Authority did not conduct any tender process, any competitive bidding process in selecting this candidate, the Noida Toll Bridge Company, for operating and maintaining this road. And finally, the Supreme Court was very critical of the language that has been used in the lease agreement, the formula that has been devised as a part of this lease agreement. The Supreme Court, in fact, opined by saying that if this formula is accepted, then there could be a situation where the company could continue recovering money by applying toll for recovery of its project cost in perpetuity. This is not something that the Supreme Court said it's comfortable with. It cannot allow that. This is a blatant illegality. And with that finding, the Supreme Court striking down that clause, and not just the clause, striking down, stripping the powers of Noida Toll Bridge Company to continue collecting tolls on the DND flyway.
Ashmit, many thanks. At least 11 people have been killed and 40 others have been injured in a massive fire on the Jaipur-Ajmer highway. The fire broke out when a gas truck collided with multiple vehicles outside a petrol pump. Prime Minister Modi has announced financial aid of 2 lakh rupees for the cane of the deceased and 50,000 rupees for those injured. Rajasthan's Chief Minister has also announced financial aid. And 5 people died after a private bus that they were travelling in overturned in Maharashtra's Raigad district after losing control. Close to 30 people sustained injuries. The passengers, all members of one family, were headed from Pune to Mahad to attend a wedding ceremony when the tragic incident took place. Five-time Haryana Chief Minister and Indian National Lokdal Supremo Om Prakash Chautala died at the age of 89. One of the tallest leaders of Haryana politics, Chautala was the son of former Deputy Prime Minister Devi Lal. He was convicted in a recruitment scandal. In 2013, served a 10-year prison term. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. And as I mentioned, the big GST Council meeting tomorrow. Stay tuned to CNBC-TV18 on Saturday evening specifically as we bring you all the highlights of the decisions that get taken. From all of us here, goodbye. Thanks for watching.